I think it's December 28th, maybe the 29th, 2010. I've been getting a lot of requests on the internet for information about my experience with Project Bluebeam. And I don't know if I have this lit or set up correctly, but since my story about what happened to me, Missing Time, only appeared in a small press publication called Last Laugh, Quiet Days in SAINT-DENIS, which I co-published with Bill Blackolive in Texas for about 7 or 8 issues. Perhaps the best thing is just for me to read it to you. Alright, I hope this works. This is from an ongoing book project called The Finishing School. Life is a School Which Finishes You Off. Missing Time by Lisa B. Fallor, copyright 2010, blah, 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 okay? There's only one UFO experience that I've had that I can be absolutely sure about after all this time. It was in March of 1989. I woke up the next morning and remembered nearly all of it. I was upset with my second husband that he had slept through the whole thing, but we kind of joked about it. He was normally a super light sleeper, but this night I hadn't even heard him breathing. He seemed to be dead. I scolded him in jest, and then I got dressed and went off to my Manhattan temp job in a law firm. All day I mentioned to my coworkers that I had been abducted by little gray men. It was a busy law firm, and there were plenty of people there who were wackier than I, and no one seemed too disturbed by my tale. Several people shrugged and said they had heard of such things. I hope it was all just a bad dream, I said, and tried not to think about it too much. But time went by, and I continued to remember the incident. Worse, over the past 12 years, this was written a few years ago, I remember more about what happened to me, the medical examination I was given in the spaceship, for example. It had a lot to do with my reproductive organs. And I think one of those aliens had sex with me, but I can't remember anything except that it was weird and painful. His penis was like a cat's. He even looked like a cat in a way, though he walked upright on 2 legs. Like a cat's penis would, I imagine, it hurt when he pulled out. I also remember something about children, and my reaction to holding a baby or something like that. I know this sounds weird. It is weird. I went to see a Park Avenue shrink about a year later, in large part because the memory hadn't faded, as even my most vivid dreams do. I have some amazing dreams, some of which take place in other centuries, in other languages, and I am not myself. Yes, I do drink, and back in New York I did smoke pot. I was sober for 2 years recently, 2.5 years. I fell off the wagon. I'm getting back on the wagon. I'm working on it, people. In France, I do not smoke pot, but in the United States, I did. I realize I'm not a credible witness, for that reason, okay. Yeah, she smoked some pot. She had some drinks. Ugh, This shrink told me I had experienced a hypnagogic hallucination. I'm not sure I'm spelling that correctly. I tried to spell it here correctly. I listened to him carefully and tried to accept that this is what had happened to me. To this day, I hope and pray it is all some sort of false memory, some sort of thing that I made up. But I know what happened. And if I am hanging on to such a memory, which is false, why am I doing so? So I can be part of some cool sci-fi game? Believe me, this game is no fun, no fun. If I am making it up, this proves I am nuts or a masochist or whatever. I admit I have a masochistic side and that I have also had mental health problems in the past. I'm certified sane and lucid this year, people. By people who don't like me, by the way. They don't want to do it, but I am. I'm considered sane this year, okay? But I was an abused child, and I have not had any memories of Daddy having sex with me or anything. My brother used to hit on me sexually, tried to have intercourse with me once. He probably doesn't remember it. I just told him no and said that was that. I could have built all that stuff up to some big melodrama and didn't. So, why am I sure about those aliens? Let's flash forward to September 2000. My third husband and I are vacationing on Cape Cod. We're staying in an adorable cottage in East Sandwich, Massachusetts. Incredibly, we have 5 nights there for free, and the kitchen is well stocked. It's an apartment swap. The little cottage is not exactly on the beach, but rather is located just behind the big cottages facing the ocean. The family who owns the cottage wisely selected a second best location, hoping their little weekend abode would be spared the effects of bad weather. The fancy houses right facing the sea are always the first to go in a severe storm. So we didn't have an actual ocean view, but right outside the deck there was a path in the dunes, and the ocean front was only about 500 feet away. We could hear the waves all the time, and there was sand everywhere and salt spray. It was a place of charm. A constant wind blew. It was cool and breezy, even on very hot days. That's Cape Cod for you, right? The little cottage had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and a huge sleeping loft. The family had fixed it up with love, and it was a gorgeous blend of rustic charm and every modern comfort. There was a fancy gas grill out on the deck. I was afraid to use it and cooked in the kitchen instead. Really terrific little cottage. East Sandwich, Massachusetts. There seemed to be every utensil there I could have thought of, all of them hung or placed in just the right place. Cozy. This was near the end of our 3-week visit to Massachusetts. Most of these 3 weeks done on a swap arrangement. We had already spent 3 nights in Newburyport, 4 nights in Lunenburg, and 7 nights in North Truro. From there, we spent 2 nights with friends in Lowell, and these friends drove us all the way out to the cottage in East Sandwich, despite the Labor Day traffic. Neither Chris, who's my spouse, nor I have driver's licenses, long story. He does now, I don't, I'm disabled. Not a good idea for me to drive, I'm on tramadol. After the 5 nights in East Sandwich, we spent 1 long night in Boston and then came back to France. But it was in East Sandwich that Chris and I experienced 3 hours of missing time, and Chris seems to have been the abductee. My health is poor, and last year I was fat and out of shape. I don't remember what year I wrote this in. I'm still fat and out of shape, okay, people? Both Chris and I drank too much. He quit drinking since. And I smoked some pot. Haven't smoked it in like 8 years. But we figured, hell, it's vacation time, so we let go and discovered the pleasures of an oyster shot. A raw oyster in a glass with vodka or tequila on top and a piece of fresh lime. Heaven. On the day we had the missing time, I had no more pot, but we had both had alcohol to drink. I had vodka and Chris had Pernod, but this was definitely not a case of alcoholic blackout. How we wish that were the case. As soon as we got to East Sandwich, I had a feeling of being ill at ease. I couldn't put my finger on it. We spent plenty of time on the beach, and I snorkeled. Chris is afraid of water. So was my impromptu lifeguard from the shore, though he couldn't have saved me if I'd have been in trouble. And we spent most of the rest of our time on the deck, enjoying the sun and the sea breezes. We did notice a lot of military aircraft going by overhead. I mentioned this to some people near us on the beach, and they said that the Otis military installation was nearby. And that it wasn't unusual to see fighter planes, etc. I asked if it were Navy, Army, or Air Force, and they said none. It's a top-secret military installation. But it was there on the maps, not all the maps, but most of the maps. And everyone knew it was there, so it wasn't really that much of a secret. I didn't give it any thought beyond this, except that when we went to bed at night, I was obsessed with pulling down the window shades and rechecking all the locks on the windows and doors. Kind of an absurd thing, The little cottage is a cracker box with nothing of great value inside, except for a TV, stereo, VCR, etc. None of the locks would have been hard for any determined thief to force. In fact, the family had a habit of storing the front door keys in the yellow plastic-covered dish in the outdoor shower on the deck. During times when the family was not there, the cottage was managed by a realty office located right on the main road, 50 feet from us. But I couldn't stop being obsessed with locking us in firmly at night and bringing those keys in from the soap dish. Absurd, really. There was a big, bright street light nearby, and the light at the windows frightened me, even with the shades pulled down. Since my March 1989 experience, any type of light at the window puts me into a panic I cannot control. Around 4 p.m. on a Thursday in the little cottage, I heard a voice in my head telling me to go lie down and take a nap. It wasn't speaking English or French. It wasn't so much as a voice as a command. I wasn't really sleepy, but I had to obey the command. Naturally, I would say to Chris, "Honey, I'm tired, I'm going to go take a nap." But weirdly, I did not look behind me, and I did not speak to Chris. I am not even sure where he was when this was going down. I just headed for the bed, and I fell immediately into a weird, deep sleep. No dreams. Even when I take an afternoon nap, I often have a dream, even though I might only be asleep 10 or 15 minutes. I have severe sleep apnea, and even when napping, tend to wake up every 30 minutes or so. But this time I was dead to the world. Like my second husband was, when I was abducted in March of 1989 in New York. At 6 p.m., I heard the phone ring, and a voice told me to get up and answer it. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 6 p.m. A friend of mine was on the phone and asked me why I sounded weird, and I said I was okay, just in a deep sleep during a nap. We spoke for about a minute and arranged to meet the next day. I remember all of the conversation. I hung up the phone and went back to bed. Again, this is not typical of me. Normally, I would have checked to see that Chris was okay. The cottage has one main common room, and I feel sure Chris was nowhere in the cottage. Normally, I would have panicked and gone to see if he was out on the deck or find out where he was. I am very maternal and protective of him, but the voice told me to go back to bed, and I obeyed. Okay, I'm going to stop this and make part 2, because I don't want these videos too long.